Hello again and welcome back to the Tramshed Theatre in Woolwich, and we're going to continue this morning on our journey through the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew chapter 5 and onwards. Now, I wonder what you like to do on long drives, perhaps with the family. You're going away for the summer, you've got a 6 or 7 hour drive and you've got to fill that time. Do something to avoid the kids arguing and bickering incessantly, or maybe that's just my experience. But on long drives, I love to play the game, Who Am I? And it's a really simple game. You have, of course, 20 questions, only to be answered yes or no, to work out who someone is, someone's thought of a historical figure, an artist, an author, a celebrity. So that's my favourite game. The problem I have is that no one really wants to play with me. But then I've thought of an update of the 20 questions Who Am I game, and it's Guess the Twitter Bio. So I've got some Twitter biographies from celebrity accounts, and I wonder if you could have any idea who these people are. So there's one Twitter biography that goes something like this. I'm the actor in some of the movies you liked and in some of the movies you didn't. Sometimes I'm in pretty good shape, other times I'm not. Hey, you gotta live, is the Twitter biography. And that is, have you guessed yet? That's Tom Hanks. This one you might be able to get. Actor, producer, running in movies since 1981. Any ideas? Becca, any ideas? No? She's not even listening to me. Tom Cruise. And finally, hey there, it's me. One Twitter biography goes, hey there, it's me. That's Matt LeBlanc, formerly of the sitcom Friends. Of course, there are some people who don't want to explain themselves, and it's fun to see who doesn't have a Twitter biography. Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey, Harry Styles, they don't really even bother telling you who they are. But if someone were to take on your identity, what questions would they have to ask to, as it were, identify themselves? Beyond the obvious stuff, beyond your gender, beyond your job, beyond your physical characteristics. I mean, who are you? What would be your existential Twitter bio? Who am I is one of the questions that troubles us in modern life. Often a long way from the people who know us well, from the places we grow up, we find that we urgently need community and we also need identity. And so ultimately, a way of finding deep purpose and meaning. Who am I? And in the sermon, Jesus gives to these disciples and to anyone who would follow him an identity and a purpose. So let me read to you from Matthew chapter 5. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up onto a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything, except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. And you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." This is the word of the Lord. So you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. You may have heard dozens of sermons on these deceptively simple metaphors. But I want to tell you that this week, as I've been preparing this talk, these have got really big on me again. I mean, there's so much here that we can talk about. And I just want to go through really quickly, really simply, really plainly, these things almost word by word. You are the light. You are the salt of the world. The first word is you. Like most languages, in the original Greek in which Matthew was writing, the pronoun, that's the person who's being addressed, is contained in the verb itself. Now, I want to give you examples from my extensive knowledge of foreign languages. I could just about scratch one from Spanish, but it's pretty simple. You know, in English we separate out the you are, but in most other languages they combine the pronoun in the verb itself. So you don't need the pronoun, you just don't put it in, unless you really, really want to emphasize something. But in this, when Matthew's recording Jesus' words, Jesus' teaching, Jesus uses the pronoun you. Yes, you. You are. Not a generic you. I'm really speaking to you guys in front of me. You ordinary people, you in all your diversity, you with your conflicts, you with your friendships. You called by me from homes, families and small towns. You. You're it. In the kingdom, the nobodies in particular and the not muches become significant people. We're back to the blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. You are, Jesus says, looking into the whites of the eyes of the disciples, who at that moment in time are probably wondering, have I made the right decision to follow this man? And Jesus says, you are the light of the world. Second word, are. You are. Not you might be, not you could be if you try hard enough. You are. An unconditional statement of fact, and therefore a matter of grace and gift. Because so far they only are who they are. They're only the people called from ordinary homes, ordinary families, ordinary towns to follow Jesus. But you are is an unconditional statement of fact. He's not saying, if you lean into all my teaching, you can become. Or if you really try hard enough, if you pull up your socks, then you will be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And Jesus says you are. He's pronouncing a kind of identity over them. So our task then is to live in the identity that we receive from Jesus. Think of a wedding. I know you'll have been to one. There's a moment, and it comes near the end, where the person, the celebrant I suppose you would call it, or the vicar, or whoever's presiding, says the words, I declare you man and wife. That's it. It's true. They are man and wife. They really are. One day they weren't married, and then the next day they are. They are man and wife. But then comes a whole life when you live out that reality. Years and years, days and weeks, where you're being what you already are. Do you remember that film, Jerry Maguire? I'm quite a fan. It's a little bit soppy. But what I love about that film is that there's this guy and he gets romantically involved with this single mother and he marries her. And at the time, he's got really mixed motivations. And over time, over a little while, it all begins to sort of falter and come apart because it's clear that he's not really sure if he loves her in that way. But then he realizes that he does, and he heads home and does this whole beautiful speech. You complete me. I'm sure you've seen it. But he begins by saying, "I'm looking for my wife." And he's moved into it. He's stepped into it. He's inhabiting that identity. They are husband and wife. He's a husband. He's been doing some husband stuff, but then he really, really becomes a husband. Basically, same for us. With God's help, all that we are called to do is be what we already are, to embrace it, to inhabit it, to live in it, what we've received already by God's gracious action. So Paul, writing to the Ephesians, chapter 4, verse 1 says, "As a prisoner for the Lord, I urge you, live a life worthy of the calling that you have received." He's saying, go deep, get stuck in, double down. Look at me, I'm in prison, I've been doing it like that. Now you follow through on your calling. You are. The third word, the. The, a definite article. The disciples are not one kind of salt, they're not one instance of light, but the salt, the light, implying a kind of singular salt, a singular light. And isn't it almost too much to think that you could be that important? I mean, I don't find that difficult, but you may find it difficult. It's almost too much to think that some of the biggest challenges facing the world right now need Christians. People think that, if anything, Christians are the problem. Jesus says that his faithful disciples are the solution. On climate change, you are the salt. When it comes to racial justice, you're the light. Now, I'm not saying that individually we bear the responsibility for these issues. We need, for instance, and I'll go on to speak a little bit more about this in a minute, we need to recognise that the you is collective. It's a plural you. You disciples together, you churches, you faithful church as a whole. You are the salt of the earth, you're the light of the world. But at the same time, it's not just an institutional thing. It's not something that somebody else does. It really applies to you. You work it out in your context, in your places. It's the truth behind those sort of slightly corny stories that you sometimes hear. You know, was it JFK that visited NASA in 1961? Pretty sure this is apocryphal. And on his tour around the building, he meets a cleaner, and he greets the cleaner and says, "Hi, I'm John F. Kennedy. What's your name?" And the cleaner tells him his name, and JFK says, "And what are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, Mr. President, I'm helping to send a man to the moon." Or there's a similar story where Christopher Wren is walking into St. Paul's Cathedral as it's partially built, and there are 3 stonemasons. And he asks what they're doing. What are you doing? What are you doing, guys? I'm presuming he didn't put it like that. The first says, "I'm just shaping a stone for this buttress." And the second says, "I'm earning 3 pennies a day." But the third says, "I'm helping Sir Christopher Wren build St. Paul's Cathedral." They're a bit corny, aren't they? But that's what it's like. It's like the NHS provides healthcare free at the point of delivery. That's what the nurse, the doctor, the administrator, the cleaner are all doing on themselves or together. You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. It is a truth both about the church as a whole, but also of you in your daily walk, wherever you find yourselves, in your homes, in your families, in your places of work, in your place of education, in your social environments. You are the salt. You are the light. So let's think about the fourth word, the word salt. Now, what is salt? We know that salt preserves and it flavours. We know that it has to be mixed in and mulched in to do its work. And that salt piled up a centimetre away from the surface of the food is no good. It neither changes its taste nor preserves it. It's got to be on, it's got to be in, it's got to be amongst. And we know that salt isn't about itself. I can think of one exception to this, by the way, which is Georgian salt, but nobody admires the taste of a particular salt. Salt is not about itself. It's about making whatever it's on better, or more long-lasting, or more flavoursome. You don't have a bowl of chips with a side order of salt. You need the salt on the chips. And about this metaphor, about this word, there's something about invisibility in its influence. When you're being salty in your place of work or in your block of flats, people might not be noticing you, but they're noticing how they feel positive turning up to work on Monday morning when, before you arrived, they hated it. Or they might be noticing how life-giving that small group session was because you were salt in that time. Or they might be really enjoying living where they are and feeling like they fit and feeling like they're comfortable in a way that they never were. There's something invisible about the influence of salt. I love this stuff, and I know actually that already you are the salt of the earth. You people that I'm talking to now, I can think of like loads of different instances how you're having that effect in your own environment. And I love that stuff. But there's something else. Perhaps Jesus has just like a second meaning kind of waiting there in the background. And it's a little bit, to be honest, it's a little bit harder. And the truth is that when the Bible talks about salt, more often than not, it's talking about judgment. So when Israel broke the covenant, Moses warned that the Lord would make the land brimstone and salt, a burning waste, unsown and unproductive, with no grass growing on it, like the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah. Salting farmland was a tactic of war and a way of cutting off an enemy's food supplies. You sow a field with salt and nothing will grow. And indeed, in the Roman-Jewish War of the late 60s AD, the Romans salted the fields of Palestine when the Jews rebelled. So Matthew's readers in the very early days would have been aware of a meaning of salt that is positive and a meaning of salt that is negative. The salt of the earth, the disciples are sown as part of God's judgment against his people who have broken their covenant with him. It's about choking off the bad things growing in the fields. And the metaphor of light can do exactly the same work. Light is a good thing, but it also exposes, shine a light on something, reveal its problems and its flaws. I went for a few weeks earlier this summer without a pair of glasses. And it does just, to be honest, it makes living in the world a little bit easier because you don't notice all the kind of like slightly the floor that needs a hoover. But you put your glasses on, you kind of see this, wow, there's dirt there, there's something that needs sorting out. One theologian put it like this: when a nation's chief domestic product consists of greed, lust, oppression, cruelty and lies, it needs to be salted until every green thing has withered. When Christians follow Jesus' commands, they undo evil habits. We avoid escalating insults that lead to murder. We nip the escalation in the bud by pursuing reconciliation. We don't simply renounce vengeance, but we offer our left cheek to receive the second slap, suffering rather than dealing out revenge. We aren't allowed to be indifferent to enemies, but we must love them, undercutting hostility. When disciples obey, hatred and violence have no traction. But what about the size of this vision? The kind of unimaginable prospects that we are the salt of the earth, the light of the world in the Greek. It actually says the light of the cosmos. Faithful disciples, when they obey, they're changing the fabric of reality itself, the whole of human life. There is no place where Jesus, through his disciples, is not. But of course, the shape of that is difficult, isn't it? It's kind of complicated. The saltiness of Jesus is our saltiness. Our saltiness is like his. It's the getting in there-ness of the incarnation. It's the getting involved in the messiness around us. It's going to the places of pain and suffering. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, it says in Philippians. Rather, in humility, value yourselves above others, not looking to your own interests, but to the interests of others. In your relationships with one another, you have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used for his own advantage, but he made himself nothing, taking on the nature of a servant and being made in human likeness, being found in appearance as a man, humbling himself and becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. The light of the world, dying on a hill, unhidden, a shame for everyone to see. This is the way of Jesus, the scandal to the Jews, the foolishness to the Greeks. How do we live into this identity given to us gracefully by Jesus? Well, let's think about that fifth word. Let's think about light. Nelson Mandela once said, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. You are meant to shine, as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. The trick, of course, is that we must remain in Jesus. We must, in John's words, John's Gospel's words, we must abide. Jesus is the source of the light. And when we know that, when we recognize that, we won't fear, we won't have anxiety about this vocation to be salt in and light. We'll be living a life worthy of the calling that we have received when we're pursuing him as the center and goal of our light. Life. Light shines in Zion, so that all nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn, it says in Isaiah. Jesus is the light of the nations. And his disciples do that work with him. Our task, in other words, is just to stick as close to him as possible. There's a term in economics that I think captures some of this. It's obliquity. It's that when you decide what you really want to go for, what the goal of, say, your company really is, and you go for it, and you make the best widget, and you put all your passion and energy and thought and effort into the best widget possible, and you do it well, and you do it consciously, and you're just mindful and really pursuing that, then of course you'll make profit. Of course your company will grow. Of course you'll have an impact. Just so for us, as we pursue Jesus, then our impact, our presence, we will be helping. We will be the light. We will be the salt. Those things will come. But we needn't be anxious as long as we're sticking close to Jesus. One commentator puts it like this: one of the most understandable worries Christians have is knowing where to go and what to do in order to be useful. Jesus wants to remove us from the unbelieving anxiety that one's missionary success is up to oneself. It's not up to you. It's not up to your skills or your networking or your friends in power. Jesus is in the Christian enterprise too, and is very interested in seeing light reach the whole house. The one who lights us up will also put us on the table. So in living into that identity, we must remain close to him. And we must, secondly, remain in community. You know, that you that I was talking about, that is a plural you. One grain of salt is no good to anyone. And a city is many dwellings. In fact, the word that, again, the New Testament Greek is polis. It means a city. Often it's translated towns in our translation, but it means a city. It means a culture. It means a gathering of people. It means a whole network of influence and relationships. And the church is an alternative city. It's an alternative polis. And when we live in ordinary life, we know that we're influenced by our parents, our family. We speak with their accents. We like the food we grew up with. We're so much the product of our environment. Now, we can't be that alternative, countercultural polis if we set our hearts on doing it alone. In fact, Jesus has a warning. Be careful. It's possible to lose your saltiness. It's possible to go lukewarm. Don't become bored. Don't lose your edge. Don't become detached from what you're doing. And one of the ways that we stay passionate is staying with passionate people. And passionate people means a passionate community, an alternative polis, an alternative people who speak differently, think differently, work differently, and are thrown, scattered like salt into the whole world. But there is this gathering, there is this sense of do this with others. Do it with Jesus and do it with others. There are pressures at work all around us and within us not to be too Christian, not to take our religion too seriously, and to relax the war against what is despicable in and amongst ourselves and with what is unjust and vicious in the community. But don't lose your saltiness. So who are you? You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world, invisible yet visible. People set apart, a city on a hill, yet involved, present, effective in any and every part of human life, because, as one theologian said, there is not a square inch of the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine. Over everything, Jesus says, this is mine. Jesus' conviction is that that light is to be seen. In some way, we're to be famous, or even possibly infamous, so that people will see your good deeds and give glory to your Father in heaven. Now, of course, Jesus later says, be careful to do your good deeds in secret, so that people won't admire you for it. But this being a light on a hill, that's different. That's not about admiring you, ultimately. This is for the glory of God, not our standing amongst our friends, our neighbours. In fact, the purpose of our whole life is his glory. In Jesus' name, amen.